So this is kind of special, Robbie. We're here at ASICS USA headquarters. It's not world headquarters, right?
Correct.
All right.
Yeah.
So
North American.
yeah, and we're talking with AJ and Chad. They both do different things at ASICS, not the same thing, but around the same stuff. So like AJ, why don't you tell us what it is that you do at ASICS?
Yeah, so hey guys, great to be here. Thanks for coming up to Boston. So I am AJ Andrassy. I'm the Global Director of Performance Running Footwear. So I sit here in Boston with a team of product managers, and we bring the footwear that you have in front of here to market. We work on bringing the running shoes that you see in the line from concept to consumer. And Chad here is on the team. He worked on that shoe specifically.
What shoe are we talking about here?
Nova Blast.
Nova Blast 2.
All right.
And there's 5 other people on my team like Chad. And so, yeah, that's what we do. That's what I do.
So to kind of give an overview for the layman or somebody coming in, you're at a running shoe company, the guy that says, here's all the stuff we need. I'm going to tell you guys what that is, and you figure out how to get it done?
Yeah, essentially, I come in and I say, hey, here's the assignments. I'm going to come back in a few months. And no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so we work, it's a high level, yeah, that's kind of what we do. What we do is we have a team. Our setup's a little unique compared to typical companies, so maybe I'll walk you through that. Our team here in Boston is part of our global office in Kobe, Japan. So actually, pre-pandemic, me, Chad, and the rest of the team, we would travel over to Japan, about 4 times a year to work on bringing this product to market. And what we're going over there is to meet with the other half of our team, and that's the designers and the developers that we work closely with based in our Kobe office. And what we do is we brief in those concepts about 18 to 24 months in advance, looking at the marketplace, looking at what consumers are interested in. And at that stage, I work with Chad and the team on kind of shaping that. And then once we kind of decide on the general direction, then I get to decide, all right, who would be good for this product this season? Who really understands this consumer, where we're trying to go after in the marketplace? Is Chad the right person to kind of take Nova Blast 1 to Nova Blast 2? So that's kind of some of the aspects of what I do, and then that's when Chad will kind of take it from there.
ASICS is set up unique in that, now are you a Japanese employee?
Yeah, so Chad and me and the rest of the team are actually Japanese employees. So the way we, depending on the size and scope of a company, you have a product team and or a merchandising team. Sometimes the company, the PM does both. We're at a size and scope of our business where we have a product team and a merchandising team. So here in this office actually is the U.S. merchandising team. And they give us feedback on the U.S. market. And our job is to listen to that feedback, but then also the feedback from Europe, Australia, Asia, South America, and then
all the places in the world.
Yeah, essentially.
Sounds global.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think you're right. Yeah. So
do you speak Japanese?
I know the word Ohio, which is good morning.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
There you
And
go.
I know arigato gozaimasu. Besides that, I just do a lot of nodding.
Oh, that's great. I mean, because that would be a whole nother level to the job if you had to learn Japanese.
Yep.
Okay, so you're doing global.
Yes.
So how does
correct.
that impact as far as the way that you think about the ASICS product? Because most of us, and we're pretty self-centered, so we're just thinking about the U.S. or
Right.
what I actually personally like. You have to think about several different markets. Can you kind of walk us through maybe what some of the trends are in different markets that would make them unique?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. There's a lot of different trends happening from a performance aspect, but when it comes to performance innovation, the U.S. Leads. So that's why our team is primarily based here. So when we look at innovation, there's definitely global companies based outside of the U.S., Audi in Germany and On is in Switzerland.
Yeah.
But most of the companies are here. So a lot of the innovation happens here. And so we're based here. But some of the trends that are different outside of it, you see some uniquenesses, primarily more in terms of maybe color or materials. There are some actual footwear trends that we have to pay attention to. So where it becomes a little more complex for us is listening to that maybe product feedback, trending out where they are kind of on the life cycle of when is this trend going to start in the United States and then, trickle over there. You see some maybe trends of when something happens here and when it makes it to Europe or South America. So it's more of juggling a little bit of that and then looking at the color and material feedback. So I don't know if that helps or maybe gives you a
It
little...
sort of does. I guess a question I have is like, I feel like from what I've heard and talking to your team and just in general,
Yeah.
America or the North American market really is starting to like a softer feel. So lighter foam, like the lighter you can make the shoe with the more cushion seems to be what makes the consumer happy. And from what I'm hearing, that's not the case globally. And
We're starting to see that trend. That's good. That's a good topic. We're starting to see that trend emerge more in other parts of the globe. I think one of the things as a consumer that this is more of industry insight is that makes it a little more complex on trends, something we don't think about because you might say, hey, why shoe A is really popular here? Why is it not popular in Europe? Or why is it not caught on in Asia yet? There's this aspect of distribution. And so we're a global company, but other companies might have a distributorship set up where they sell their licensing rights to a distributor in another region. And then there's a lot of back-end supply chain stuff in terms of how they get that product to market. So there's a lot of nuances that we don't think about as consumers that do have some influences on the trend.
so it's not necessarily that we happen to like softer shoes. They maybe haven't gotten the softer shoes.
There's
so
some of
not-
that, yeah.
Okay, but on the other flip side, it does seem like for racing especially, it seems like a firmer, lower stack shoe is more popular in, say, Asia than it would be here now where we're like, if it doesn't have a 30 millimeter
Yeah.
stack, that we're like, eh.
Yeah. This is actually a good one for Chad to talk about because he just worked on the Metaspeed Sky and the Metaspeed Edge, and he was working closely as a team of a lot of people. And the Edge and Sky is a great story on the innovation and discovery we had on that project, but also the different consumer trends. And I think something that you touched on, though, is we also have to take into account how people are built, the size of the people, the mass of the people.
Yeah.
So there are some trends that are maybe distributor related that I talked on, but it also could be more based on size of the individual or the general population and how they're built. And I don't know, Chad, you want to kind of dive in a little bit on this?
Yeah, I think you touched on it, Thomas, in terms of like the nuance of Asia versus the U.S. or kind of the Western countries. Like Japan, one really interesting fact is like for them, 40% of the sales come from racing product compared to us, which is more like, a Nimbus, Cumulus, higher cushion training product. And so I think you see the amount of individuals in that country looking to race or compete at a higher level being a much higher percentage than just somebody looking to go out and complete a race. And so really the motivation, I would say, is slightly different between the two. And it definitely has an input in terms of like the type of gear they're looking for. And so while we create product for the global range, there might be 5 or 6 additional racing products that won't be seen here domestically, but that Japan or other Asian countries will adopt because it better suits that consumer in terms of lower stack height, a little bit more responsive platform, different fit profile. And so really that's kind of the other component in terms of taking all these global insights and making sure that we're actioning on it for, not just the North American market, but also, our home country as well.
Well, that's interesting because earlier today you kind of talked to us a little bit about 2 markets that you go after, which is like the club sensei and then sort of the fitness. I forget the term.
Fitness runner?
Yeah, just fitness runner. So I did remember it. That's good.
Club Run Sensei.
Yeah, Club Run Sensei, which are 2 different markets for you. And I'm guessing that in the Asian market, what you're saying is that there's more competitive. People run for an actual sport, where in the U.S. and maybe I don't know about Europe, there's a fitness aspect to it where it may be weight loss or part of running might be part of their training for another reason, not
Just
specifically for running?
general interest running.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think you definitely touched on it. Like there's the trend for general health and wellness, which is really popular, especially with COVID and the impact on like how do I find something that can kind of be an escape from work or from, you know, being home for, you know, months on end with all the things that are going on. Within Japan, I think the other kind of unique thing from a distribution standpoint is that they even kind of market their product based on like race finishing time. So in terms of like if you're a 4-hour marathoner, there's like a product for you. If you're a 3:30, where I think we don't go quite that far into micro dissections as much. It's, you know, if you're racing, do you like a high stack height? Do you want a carbon plate? Do you want something a little bit more traditional? And so I think because of the amount of product that we're selling for that, you know, I am a runner and I'm looking to, you know, I've completed X amount of marathons and my goal is to be this much faster. So I think more of the kind of the impetus there is that they want to, you know, have a tangible improvement on their time. Whereas, you know, the amount of runners here that are, you know, doing rock and rolls or more experiential running, I would say is kind of the lion's share of that group. And then obviously you have like Olympics and other things that tend to increase participation or kind of, you know, bring new people into the fold, which is always a great thing for growing the sport. But I think that's maybe the fundamental difference in terms of how they engage with even their running in terms of, is it a component of their, you know, maybe they run, they spin, they swim, they're doing yoga. Whereas in some of the other markets, it's, you know, I am a runner and that's, you know, that's what I'm doing.
It's my sport.
Exactly.
That's interesting that you say that it would be marketed for like pace, because what that would bring to me is it aspirational pace, or is it like, because if say that you're a 9-minute runner in Japan and Metaspeed Sky comes out and they're like, this is for the 6 to 5 minute pace runner, are you like, well, I want to get that because I want to go there? Or is it like, oh, I'm not going to get that shoe, I'll stick with the, I don't know what would be the equivalent shoe, but like, do they limit themselves by doing something like that, or limit sales by doing that?
Maybe to an extent. I mean, I can't speak to that, you know, fully since I, you know, live and work here and go to Japan, you know, a handful of times a year. But I think really it's understanding like the right type of product that's built with the context of that consumer. So if you're more a biomechanically efficient runner and you are running at a certain pace, you're likely going to enjoy X product versus if you're, you know, running at like a 7-minute mile pace and you're looking to, you know, let's say finish it in 4 hours or so. So I think they're using that lens in terms of including us in certain markets to build an appropriate solution. So kind of like the analogy I would use is like you wouldn't buy, you know, a sedan to tow a boat. So it's like mating the proper equipment or the proper product with kind of what your aspiration or goal might be.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, I don't think we introduced Chad.
You guys didn't.
We didn't.
Oh,
AJ,
gosh.
what are you doing? Just throwing him in the mix without letting us know who he is? He could be the janitor here at ASICS. We don't know.
Oh man.
Very informed.
so
Janitor is my
Chad,
Yeah.
what's your fish
Chad,
title?
Chad
And I actually just met, so that's
Okay, cool.
that's the problem.
from the street.
So
He
Chad,
knows a lot about the company.
we don't need to rewind all the way back, but Chad, why don't you tell people what it is that you do here for ASICS?
Yeah, so I work for AJ on the global product team, and I'm a global product line manager. So
Cool.
essentially, I work with the triad of design, development, to turn consumer insights into product.
All right.
A little bit about Chad and I actually is, so I started with ASICS 8 years ago, and I came in as the tech rec manager. One of my first hires was Chad as the Pacific Northwest tech rec manager.
True story.
And then 3 years ago, I came into this role, and he was a product manager already on the team. So now we reunite again.
There you
So
go.
kind
The
of a
Avengers
cool,
are back.
yeah, cool story.
That is cool.
I got a question, and this can kind of lead into, you know, the Nova Blast and some of the other shoe stuff we're going to talk about. But, you know, one of the things that we noticed with ASICS in the past few years is that it seems that for a while there, maybe 8 years ago, 6 years ago, things were starting to get a little stagnant, maybe kind of resting on your laurels. You know, you did have these Nimbus, Kayano,
The legends.
the legends
Yeah.
of ASICS. And then it seems like you've really turned the ship around to where it's now like back to being this fresh, innovative brand, which it's
Yeah.
awesome because we love running in pretty much all the models.
Robbie's saying it really nice, but
Yeah,
there was a period of
freaking
time.
Yeah.
There was a period of time where we just wrote off ASICS as,
Yeah.
okay, it's going to be I'm going to open the box. I'm going to get the same thing I've been getting. I'm not seeing some of the exciting things, some new things. As the guys that are in charge of bringing those new things to market, how difficult was that to kind of like, because you had something good going on, it's pretty reliable. I build a Nimbus, I build a Cumulus, I build the, the Cayano, it's gonna sell. I'm gonna put them into the, I'm sure even you might get pushback from running retail that they're like, do not change this shoe. I can stick the same one on people year after year. I don't want it changed. Yeah. How hard is it from the company culture to move that, and how hard is it then selling back into retail? And I don't even know if you're qualified to tell me that, but
yeah, I can. I'll take a stab at that.
All right.
Having lived through that, and I came in to ASICS when we were number 1 in running, number 2 in run specialty at the time, and I think what I saw happen is we globally fell maybe in love with the Legends and kind of assumed that they would sell themselves.
And what are the Legends, by the way?
Yeah, so Legends for us, we call them internally Legends because of the size and stature of the models. That's the Nimbus, Cumulus on the neutral side, and the Cayano and 2000 on the protection side. And so, and they would kind of sell themselves. We used to say a bad Cayano would sell 2 to 3% more than it did the previous year. A good Cayano would sell 2 to 3% more than it did the previous year. So it was kind of that type of business. Yeah. And I think you see sometimes when companies hit $1 billion in a region like we did in the United States, North America, you start to focus on what's next. And we lost a little sight of what we had and not kind of continuing to innovate and deliver newness for the Cayano consumer, but then also consumers like yourselves that knew the brand but was looking for maybe something different. And so we've evolved. We went through some kind of structural changes a few years ago. We're refocused on running, and it's brought some really nice energy to the brand, not only here in the United States, but globally we restructured too to really focus on being number 1 again in performance running and racing. So that refocus has allowed us to kind of recenter on, and that was around the time that I came on 3 years ago in this role, recentered on, what was wrong, what was missing, identifying those gaps and trying to fix those. And so we've moved fast since that. We've brought Nova Blast, we're on Nova Blast 2, we've brought some really exciting freshness to racing. And now it's time to continue to push, but now start to innovate and bring some of that freshness to the Legends as well. And so it's been a fun journey to be a part of. We're definitely challenging, the marketplace from where it was a few years ago to now. There's a lot more brands. Retail has changed. The consumer's changed. Yeah. But that presents actually some really good opportunities for us because there's a lot of consumers that don't actually know ASICS, surprisingly, and that's actually a good thing for us. So, it's been an interesting journey, but it really comes down to us just remembering what we're about and focusing on that and putting the right people and processes in place to actually deliver on that goal.
Yeah, and you guys do a lot of testing. You have a lab over in Japan where you do extensive studies on performance, right?
Yeah, it's the Institute of Sports Science. It's in. It's not at our office. It's maybe a 40 minute train ride from our office. It's up in the mountains in Kobe, and it's about 80 to 100 scientists there with like doctorates and researching a ton of stuff. I mean,
they're smart.
Yeah, they're
Well,
they're doctors.
Yeah, the reason I'm going to this question, and Chad might actually be able to shed some light on this. We're not just putting a foam on a shoe and saying, okay, this looks like a running shoe. This should operate like a running shoe. There's some testing that goes into it, and I think there's a lot of people that are curious, especially with like some of the race stuff. So we get into the Metaspeed Sky, the Metaspeed Edge, and to the layman or to the regular consumer, there's not much difference between those two shoes. Us as geeks, we're like, okay, we know one has a higher drop, lower drop. The plate differential is a little different.
Right.
But all this was studied and looked at, and then you go and design from there. Or are you saying, hey, here's the brief. We need to have a race shoe. It's got to have a lightweight foam. It's got to have a plate. This is the market. How does it work with having that?
Yeah, I think it really just depends on the product or on the item. For our racing product, it was really It started with the view of Tokyo Olympics, and being that it's in our backyard and we were a gold sponsor, we really wanted to show up in a way that was kind of declaring that we're back. I think to AJ's point, there's been a lot of things done operationally behind the scenes in terms of realigning our teams and being more efficient and kind of taking care of a lot of maybe some of our deficiencies in the past to make sure that history doesn't repeat itself. But for the racing product, that was really a collaboration with a lot of our kind of elite roster of athletes. And so Sarah Hall was involved with it, Zane Robertson, a few of our European athletes as well. I mean, and for that item, it was actually pretty interesting working on it in that typically when you're working on a shoe, you have an 18-month cycle of 3 different sample rounds. So from when you brief the product and when it comes to marketplace in your run specialty store or other channel of distribution. And so for that, because we were working with our elite athletes, we were able to effectively turn much quicker. These athletes are knowing, in minute detail, I need you to add a little bit of more midsole material on the medial side of the forefoot because I feel like I'm dumping slightly, or the carbon plate shape needs to be fine-tuned here, or I feel like the density needs to be a little bit firmer in the heel because I feel like I'm getting a little bit too much displacement or deformation in the foam. So really for that caliber of product, you're working with kind of an athlete contingent that is best of the best and that's operating in that kind of 1% threshold, where the aspiration would be that you're equipping them with a shoe that they could win gold in. And so it's I'd say that is kind of like the pinnacle. And then as we draft down to Arcanos, Nimbus, and other products, we have kind of a multi-pronged approach where we have the Institute of Sports Science, which gives us biomechanical insights, material testing in terms of deformation of the upper and kind of all that nerdiness, gas transfer. I mean, we could get into it, but it'd probably be another podcast. We have a lab that we use on the West Coast to kind of also cross-validate. And then we have a whole, roster of external wear testers as well. And so we look at, who is the Kano designed for in terms of the target weight, the pace they're running at, and then we really drill down to make sure that we're getting the right insights based on who we feel the right consumer is. So if the consumer is running, for a Kano, potentially a little bit, more of a higher mileage runner who's going to be, overpronating. And so we try to make sure that we're not just choosing anybody for that type of product, so that when we come to market, ideally every shoe is better than the one prior.
It sounds easier than I think it probably actually is, because we've talked to like elite athletes. Mm-hmm. We're like, what's your favorite shoe? And they're like, I don't know, whatever they send me. Yeah. And I'm just like, really? Like, this is your job? Like, this is your tools of your trade? You don't have a preference for a foam or this and that? And they're like, this is cool, whatever they said, this one's good. When you're developing these shoes, is it tough to find those athletes that perform at certain levels that can articulate what they want out of a shoe?
Yeah, I think you work with some, and there's like working with Clayton Young, for instance. He was one who is really fascinated by like engineering and kind of materials. And so when talking with him in a hotel room about some of the early prototypes, he just like eyes wide open, just kind of like deer in the headlights, but in a good way, where you're kind of like getting somebody who's like, I understand this and I want to help you to improve the product. Conversely, like you can work with some athletes who maybe are a little bit, they have some preconceived notions on, carbon plates or certain foams. And so it's, I think, overcoming those obstacles to make sure that, I think part of it too is, not to digress too much, but it is somewhat psychological too, where if you're lacing up a shoe, you want to feel like, okay, this is the best tool to win this race or to perform at a PR level. And if not, then you have an issue, with the sponsored athlete. And so I think that's kind of the framework that you're it's a good, healthy tension to make sure that you're delivering on all those fronts.
I know a lot of our viewers, and I've always wondered this, is how does one become a wear tester? Because it seems like they're just random people out there testing shoes, and I never really know like how they get into that.
Well, I guess the question, there's two parts to that question. How do you become one? And hopefully you're interested in shoes. But the other part for me is like, I'm not always, like, I'm a little skeptical because we get to try so many different shoes. I'm like, if you've only run in a few shoes, like, what do you really know other than, like, you might say, this feels good, doesn't feel good.
Yeah, I think, Robbie, for certain testers, it's like a requirement for a mythical level of mustache.
Yeah, I mean, so, it should be for all testers.
So I think you're an ace right there. But in all seriousness, we do a couple different ways of recruitment. So we go to like health and fitness clubs and try to like recruit people that way in terms of.
Does it seem weird like when you just walk up to people like, hey,
Yeah.
you like running?
I got a
Hey man, what's up?
What size foot is that? Is
Yeah,
that a
nice
9?
pace.
That looks like a 9.
yeah, just trying to profile creepily. Like, hey, you might be a 9.5. That's not the right shoe for you. So we've done that, and I think that's been, in the era of COVID, obviously that's a little bit harder. Nobody wants to really talk to you in that level of proximity. But really, we, again, kind of going back to it, we have a couple different ways that we wear test in terms of in lab, but then out of lab, we use a third-party platform, and for that, we can look at kind of how many tests they've done in the past. We don't get visibility to what other brands, but we write the surveys in terms of the product manager to kind of, one of the filter questions is like, what shoes are you currently running in, what mileage, and then we try to make that a little bit more of a relationship. So ideally, if you test with a certain tester and you have some rapport with them, you might consider, okay, like maybe this person wasn't the ideal tester for the Dynablast, but the Novablast, when I'm working on that, I'm gonna
How many
draft them for
miles
that.
do they usually do testers put on shoes?
We try to set a benchmark that's attainable in the short turn cycle that we have between sample rounds. So at minimum, it's 60 miles for a handful of weeks. We have certain testers who are doubling, tripling that, if they're doing grit or putting in some mileage. But we really try to be very explicit about what the expectation is. And, that being said, humans are humans, so you might have some that aren't quite meeting that criteria, and you have the autonomy to then, either
Get out.
shelve them.
Yeah, and on that, there's like short-term tests and then long-term tests. So we need some immediate feedback, and then when you're making decisions on the product, then you have those people that are running in it a few extra weeks to get it to that 300-mile mark to see how it holds up.
Right.
But that's where the partnerships are helpful. There's a lab that we use that's able to simulate 300K over 24 hours on a shoe.
Oh, wow.
So that's super helpful. And that gives us, so then you get the shoe back and you look at it and you're able to look at the compression, look at the outsole, look at this. So there's like, our partners are super helpful in it. And
That's cool.
if you have a size 9, you can reach out to us.
Cool. You're going to get a lot of reaching.
Yeah.
Quick thing for you. So brands are known for different stuff, and you just mentioned like wear and stuff
Yeah.
like that, and like Volvo with safety. There's different companies that have stuff they hang their hat on. One of the things that ASICS has tried to maintain is durability and longevity of the shoe value. I guess you could put it in that category. How important is that to the DNA when you're designing a shoe?
Chad, maybe you can talk about it in the lane of like a shoe like Metaspeed, and then even a shoe like Novablast,
Yeah, so I think it goes back again to like the intended use for the consumer. So whenever we build product, there's kind of a few fundamental principles that we operate off of, durability and function kind of being paramount. And durability on the one hand isn't maybe the sexiest word, where that's not going to sell a shoe per se in terms of the experience or feel, but we feel as a brand that that's something we need to deliver on for all of our consumers. But to AJ's point, the durability standard of a product like a Metaspeed, where you have a nylon-based foam with a much thinner outsole to hit sub 200-gram weight target and really be like a racing tool, that's going to have a different standard than a Nimbus or a Kano, even a slightly different standard than a Novablast. And that again kind of rolls into how we test with our wear test platforms, and also how we test in the lab to kind of make sure we're simulating the right type of load, the right weight. We can actually, for the short-term 24-hour turnaround, we can do pronation, we can do adjusting of the user weight to kind of see, okay, how much midsole deformation or compression are we seeing for 180-pound athlete in a Nimbus versus...
Is this basically a robot leg or something? Like, what's going on?
It's the Terminator T800.
All right.
We,
I knew it.
yep.
Yeah, and I think
Get him on the podcast next time.
I run a lot.
I'll be back.
and on the durability, one of the things that you mentioned, like kind of people have a standard and expectation of ASICS product with durability, that consumers in general have a really funny thing when with running shoes and durability expectations. Someone will bring a shoe into you worked at retail, and Chad did, and they'll bring in a shoe, and it's like 5 years old.
Yeah.
And yeah, why didn't this shoe hold up? But like we look at this going, dude, your shoe's 5 years old. But to them, like that shoe, that's an investment. And so I think from an AHQ perspective, ASICS headquarters, they put a high value in understanding and going back to some of our company core values, they really put a premium on putting themselves in the consumer's mind with the durability and really understanding that they're spending a good amount of money and they're expecting a ROI of durability. And when we develop our own materials, like our rubbers are our own materials, a lot of our midsoles, and that allows us to kind of put a higher emphasis on that. And I think that's just something that's ingrained in our culture that, hey, consumers expect durable product and we don't want to disappoint them.
What do you think are some of the other hallmarks at ASICS?
I think we're known as a company of Kaizen. That's a Japanese kind of word for, incremental improvement. I'm probably butchering that a little bit, but the general philosophy is like incremental adjustments, right? Moving a little bit to not kind of bring the consumer along, and if it works, just slightly modify it. And that's good and bad. Kaizen was good, and then it became bad for us. And then that period where we lost our way, now we're kind of doing a little bit of both. Now we're kind of Kaizen and then going really fast with like Nova Blast, Meta Speed, and just bringing a ton of innovation.
You don't know the Japanese word for that?
I don't. Yeah, I think actually it's like maybe chojo, or like that's like a phrase that we use actually on Meta Speed. Chojo, or
so chojo translates to striving for the peak, and that was kind of the whole kind of framework that we developed the shoe on. So an athlete's always striving for the pinnacle, and so how do we kind of use that to not just kind of eke along, but like, if we need to take a magnitude higher step to get there, we're gonna do it.
Yeah. Robbie, I'm gonna ask you a question.
Okay.
Okay, how much does the look of the shoe influence your review of the shoe?
It's a good question. I wish I could put a firm, number on it or whatever, but it definitely. You agree that when you look at a shoe top down, it makes a difference the way that you feel when you're running it.
Well, Chad earlier talked about, and this is why I'm asking this question, you talked about the athlete strapping it on and emotionally or psychologically looking at the shoe going, there's a fast day shoe, I'm going to go fast in it, or this is the shoe that I want to run in. Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, as much as I would love to just be totally robotic and subjective or objective in my analysis of a running shoe, like how does this feel, how does it go, how many miles can I do it, and that's the performance. For me, the look,
even the colors,
sways a ton into the shoes.
Dude, they are laying you up, man.
I know. So Thomas, you're saying you're really vain? Is that what I'm understanding?
You know what? Actually, I would have to say yes, but it does make a difference. Like when we were looking at some of the samples today of the shoes, there's some that I'm like, if I got that, I'm not sure I would give that a great review, but the same shoe in this other colorway, I'm like, that looks pretty dope. And I know that I can still divorce, like I just won't look down while I'm running because I've run in some ugly shoes that are great. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying they're ASICS, I'm saying just in general.
Sure.
But, I do, if the shoe looks good and it feels good, it just sings. It's another level. How much in the design process are you thinking about that, like when you're putting the shoes together for the consumer?
I would say it's top of mind from we even start color before we start our briefing in terms of like color and material trends are kind of like the precursor to the seasonal kickoff. Mm-hmm. And so on the one hand, and I might just be making this up in terms of like this being an old adage, but I would say color and footwear is kind of the great equalizer where you have, a Nova Blast, and it could be that maybe you're not super keen on the sky blue with red hits, but guess what? There's 7 other color combinations that you can pick from. And then next season, there's going to be an additional 4 or 5 that are going to complement that. And so I think as we and many brands apply color, it's really through the lens of who are we targeting. And in certain models, we can kind of push and pull a little bit more progressively. In other models, for...
Like the Noosa Tri.
Yeah, the Noosa Tri, it's kind of like if you were to...
All the colors.
Yeah, exactly. It's like all the colors of the rainbow and just, but in a very thoughtful way. But like for a legend type product, you have potentially a little bit more conservative consumer, and so we have like your triple blacks, we have your grays, we have your whites. So I totally get it, and I think that's the beauty of it, where we're not creating a singular solution where it's.
You bring up a good point though. So you were a tech rep. You were working and selling into local running stores. They probably were like, I want to buy 2 colors and that's it. And now things have kind of shifted where you can go online. You can shop ASICS.com. You could shop any of the number of retailers that are online retailers. You could go into a store. Do you find that now that has opened you up to have more options in colorways and in looks and feels of different shoes?
I think to an extent it has. I mean, online, obviously, you have this concept of endless aisle, where in store you have a finite kind of brick and mortar square footage, and you have to manage inventory in terms of turn rate or how quickly you're selling through. And it's a business, and so you have to kind of manage that and make sure you're satisfying ideally the broadest demographic of consumers that walk through your door. And so really for each run specialty store or sporting goods store, they even have, similarly to we do, like a consumer profile of who is this consumer. Is it the soccer mom who's coming in and who's buying footwear for the full family? But I digress. I think to color, absolutely. We've been able to kind of try certain colors and be able to use them through the lens of potentially they're not going to sell in our traditional retail environments, but we actually strongly believe in this color, and so we're going to put it in the line and kind of organically see how it does through our own e-commerce. And then if we get good traction there, we can then kind of use that as a proof point to kind of push a little bit further in the future. But our color and design team, they do a great job of making us, a little bit uncomfortable in a good way, where we're like, I kind of want this in a gray with a blue stripe, and they're like, yeah, that's 10 years ago.
Okay.
And so like,
you're like, they just diss you.
Yeah, so that's their domain, and that's kind of where their sweet spot is. And so it's a really comes down to trust. Like, do you trust your colorist? And I think, for me, working with the consumer and in various aspects of like the material library, I'm not self-professed the most fashionable guy, so I'm not gonna say like,
but I mean, they're going to be able to see on camera he actually is quite stylish.
Thank you, Thomas.
He's wearing the wide collection in
Yeah.
gray.
Triple gray.
Triple gray. So here's your shoe. So that's actually interesting because, I'm sure you've been surprised by some of the color combos that come out. But one of the biggest surprises, I think, for ASICS and for consumers, Robbie, you might agree with this, is the Nova Blast when it came out.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We first saw it 2019 December at the running event in Austin, and I don't think that ASICS as a company was like, hey, this is going to be a new star for us, and it turned out to be a big star. Yeah, it's been pretty good. So has this opened up since the consumers have responded so well to it? And you've worked on this. Chad's worked. If you're listening, you can't see me pointing at Chad, but Chad's worked on Nova Blast 2 and Nova Blast 3. Has this shoe opened up doors for more experimentation?
Absolutely. I think we initially, when we briefed the product in the first one came out in SS20, and it was kind of the poster child for FF Blast in terms of this new energetic, dynamic, experiential foam that complemented our core inline product. And at the time, we briefed it as kind of this idea of Cloud 10, where you have the Cloud 9, which is kind of luxurious and soft and lively. But we were like, what would you if you dialed that to 11, or in this case 10, what would that feel like? And that was kind of the guiding North Star for the initial brief. And admittedly, I think going in, we saw an opportunity in the U.S. market. We saw an opportunity in parts of Europe, potentially in China and other areas. But it was a calculated risk, but also really exciting to kind of see the market response, where we initially targeted this towards a consumer that was maybe a little bit less serious of a runner, but we actually saw early adoption was kind of our core runner, but a much younger demographic, or actually even consumers who had left us because maybe our products was not quite soft enough for them, or for certain shoes, like they wanted something a little bit lighter, a little bit more lively. And so,
let's be honest, it just looks cool.
And Sarah Hall started using it for training, right?
Yeah. I mean, we even saw our athletes were kind of pulling it for their rotation. So
yeah, I think what it did also is, one of the things you have to remember in product also is you're wrong a lot too. It's kind of like baseball in some regards. Maybe not as bad of hitting average, but you're wrong a lot. And I think this was a good one we were happy to be maybe wrong on. We were a little maybe we were bullish internally, but bearish maybe in terms of, oh man, what are people going to think? Especially this was kind of that coming out period of that, falling back some. But what it has opened, I think what it really did show is there were so many people looking for innovation from ASICS, and we just hadn't had it for a while.
Yeah.
And so that, in terms of opening doors for us, internally and externally, for sure, it showed us, it's influenced our design and other products. It's helped tell us that, hey, let's innovate some more. Let's push a little faster because actually people want this from ASICS,
I think that's the exciting thing about the brand is that it does have such a strong resonance with consumers. And not only that, it has a valid running history.
Right.
So when other shoe companies try to come out with a running shoe that don't have the legacy that ASICS has, the trust isn't there.
Yeah, because
So-
you want to root for ASICS because a lot of us, growing up, had that attachment to nostalgia, and you want to see them
Yeah.
succeed.
Yeah, and the athletes that have run it, like Dina Castor, and you see that and you look up to it and you say this has a running pedigree. So to see you guys come back strong, and it has been fun for us. I guess what we're kind of getting long on time, but one of the things that I'd want to know from you both, and maybe you could each answer it, is where you see the biggest opportunities going for ASICS in the next 5 years. What we could see from you as a company that you feel will differentiate you from your competitors?
Yeah, wow, that's a deep question.
It's like an interview question.
Yeah.
Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah.
We got another hour.
Check, please. Yeah, that's a great question, and I think they've all been great questions, but that's a really good one. I think what you've seen from us in the last 3 years, 2022, we're even more excited about than 2021. And 2023 is a big year for us. That's the Nimbus 25 and Kayano 30. And we've been having our sights set on that as a big year, is how do we continue to take some of this innovation we've seen and start to really roll it into the legends, if you will, as we talked about. But then also, not just roll it in, but let those be kind of what they used to be. Those that grew up in the sport remember those as like the Nimbus every year in Kayano. People were excited to see what those were because those were innovative items. We'd like that to be the case again in 2023. So that's the mentality we're working towards, is getting those to be some icons of the industry again. And the other I would say is focusing on sustainability, innovating with that at the forefront, not just making it a talking point, but making that kind of day-to-day product requirements, and then understanding the benefits of sound mind, sound body. So right now, you talked about the psychology of it. That's really a big part of us with our product creation, is thinking about that sound mind, sound body philosophy. How do the aspects of working out and running benefit you mentally? I think we even had a campaign recently internally about that, where you could track the mental uplifting on ASICS.com, which is you could see how working out really benefited you, the brain activity, which is pretty cool. Is getting deeper into that, understanding, people are starting to understand that more, and how does that help link product innovation? So I'd say those are the three big things I think we're really looking forward to, is innovating, continue to innovate and get the legends stronger again, and then sustainability, making that more of a day-to-day thing, which it already is, but more of a daily requirement, and sound mind, sound body being at the forefront of everything we do.
Yeah. I think my answer to that question, after having some time to think about it, would be, on the one hand, innovation is always going to be exciting. Like you want to see something new from an authentic, incredible brand. I think the other kind of pillar to that, though, would be accessibility. We have a lot more consumers who are now engaging with the sport because of COVID or because of just having more time. And how do we build product for that consumer as well? Obviously, you could sell 2 shoes to one person, but I think I'm personally very excited about the fact that there's just more people being active and running is one of the ways that they're doing that. And so for us, how do we not alienate that group as kind of a brand that maybe has historically been very serious and very, I don't want to say pinnacle, but kind of maybe a little bit in the realm of, if I'm a newer runner, do I feel comfortable purchasing an ASIC product? Hopefully that's a yes for them. Other things that I think are going to be very interesting in the future are sustainability. You've seen that with our Kayana Light, our Nimbus Light. We're going to continue to move the needle in other ways moving forward. But yeah, I think it's, and I mean this sincerely, like the last 5 years in the footwear space have been so dynamic and so interesting that I think, having been now, 12 years in terms of retail and working for ASICS, I never would have thought how much would have changed in retrospect. So on the one hand, 5 years sounds like a long time, but I feel like it's, the pace at which we're moving. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I think as a product manager, it would be how do we surprise and delight consumers? And if that's like the next new Nova Blast, if it's a new experience, I think it's how do we not, follow a trend, but deliver something meaningful for the consumer that really, whether it's a tool within the rotation or adds value through less injury. I think there's a lot of different ways and different lanes we could approach it, and we're actively exploring a number of those. But to me, I just see like a blue sky in terms of just potential with all of our new innovations, new foams, plate application. It's a pretty exciting time in footwear.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess, Robbie, that these guys are running in shoes that we haven't seen yet. But
Yep.
what would you say
You're right.
with that?
Very, very concise.
Affirmative.
AJ, if you had to pick a shoe that the consumer can get their hands on right now that would be your favorite ASICS, what would it be?
I would say, and it's not just because it's on the table, the Nova Blast 2. I think Chad did an awesome job of taking that. There's still some tweaks that we hope to deliver on Nova Blast 3, right? Product people are, I think, always kind of cynical a little bit. There's always room for improvement. But I think it's awesome how great the feel is. The stability improved. It's not so wobbly, right? That was some of the complaints. The upper fit is improved. But the first time I went on a run on that shoe, I was so excited. And then I actually was dealing with a bad ankle at the time, but I kept going out to run. I just find that shoe so fun to run in, and that's a huge white space that we've been trying to get better at, and I think this shoe just nails it. A very accessible shoe, so fun to run in, and a good price.
I do find it's a good shoe for anybody of any level.
Yeah.
It does seem to, it crosses the board of casual gym goer to all the way up to a serious runner who just wants something a little softer underfoot.
Yeah.
So, Chad, same question.
I mean, I feel like AJ stole my thunder, so I'm just going to have to mic drop and
All right.
walk away.
Is it because it's your baby?
I mean, I think I'm a little bit impartial.
Don't call my baby out.
Yeah.
Don't call
Be
my
careful what you say. I'm going to have to, I know where you live. No, yeah, I think on the one hand, you have an emotional attachment with when you create something tangible. I think to AJ's point, like you're a victim of the fact that when pencils are down and you have to finish a product, like there's probably 3 or 4 things that you're like, oh man, put that down for version 3. Like I'm going to get after it. I'm going to tweak this or tweak that. But going back to it, I think, in the rotation, this and the Nimbus Light too are kind of the two that I go back to.
I was going to bring that as my pick.
Well, we saw evolution of some of the shoes today, and I have to say I'm really excited about the new, both the Nimbus regular and the Nimbus Light 3 now, right? Jeez, 3.
Yeah, a few months away.
Yeah. And I think that the consumers are also going to enjoy some of those updates. You keep hinting at 2023 there's going to be some radical change or something, but I guess we'll have to wait for that one.
I mean, maybe we'll be coy about that one.
All right. Why don't you guys go get lunch and we'll just wander the building a little bit.
Yeah. Tell me your password and
whatever you do, don't go on
Can I
the
borrow
second
your
floor.
eyeball?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been great. It's really, I think, a lot of learning. I think there is a lot of interest in this brand and seeing what you guys are doing. I think it's great that you guys kind of dusted it off and brought it like some fresh, I don't know if it's fresh. What would you call it? Fresh blood? Fresh?
Yeah, I guess.
It's as cool as Robbie's mustache.
Yeah.
I was just going to say.
I'm trying to think of some sort of relation to the Flight Foam Blast. You're blasted from the future. That's what
Or like Doritos Blast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Let's talk
tasty.
about that some more.
Before we end, I do want to give you guys, I'm not just saying this because I'm on the podcast and want to be invited back again or something, but I do love what you guys are doing. My wife is not really a huge runner, and I've had her check out some of your content, and Chad talked about accessibility. And I think what you guys are doing is great, because it just makes the sport like approachable and digestible, and running's intimidating for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I think you guys just do a great job of keeping it fun. You don't take yourself seriously. And for people coming into the sport, if they discover it, it really makes you want to stay around. So thanks for doing what you guys do. I love
That's
the
awesome.
approach you have.
Let's turn off the camera so we can get a little closer, AJ.
Little kumbaya moment.
But anyway, yeah, just
Well,
thanks for doing
that's
that.
awesome. I appreciate that. And, we couldn't do it without you guys. And we say this a lot, but all we're trying to do, and I know sometimes our feedback probably isn't the greatest thing to hear, but, we're trying to just create a better running experience for people who are going to go out there and try it.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's going to be an ASICS, sometimes it's not. It's usually, there's a model from everybody that usually can fit the bill. But, yeah, it's all about creating that better experience, and we really respect what you guys are doing, because you're really doing that from the ground up and building something. And, we look at this stuff, and every time we open a box, we get excited to see what you guys are up to.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm all warm and fuzzy inside now.
Yeah.
Can we
All right.
hug? I mean, at COVID, we can't, right? Yeah.
Well, we can.
We can.
Okay.
Yeah, we can. We're running out of time.
Okay.
So,
Oh,
Yeah.
He says this. Brandon's telling us to stop.
yeah. All right, guys.
All
I
right.
think that wraps it up. Thanks
Yeah,
again.
thank
Hey,
you.
thanks, guys.
All right.